All right, Justin. So with the first pick in this 2024 rookie redraft, now that we're basically halfway through the season, I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels, the kind of consensus 102, 103 in Superflex rookie drafts back in May, but has now risen to, for me, being the rookie QB1 in this class, but also probably a dynasty top 3 overall quarterback based on what he's been doing and his age and his rushing ability. I mean, am I too high on that, or is that a very deserving ranking based on what he's been doing so far halfway through the year?
I agree. I think he's the 101, or at a minimum, right? He has forced himself into that conversation. Like it's probably between three guys I'm comfortable with at the 101 here. But as far as QB3 goes for overall dynasty, that might be a little steep. I mean, you absolutely have Josh Allen. You obviously have Lamar. And then after that, he's in the conversation. I mean, who else would you consider in that QB3 slot over Jayden Daniels?
I think the next guys after that would be, Jalen Hurts, just because we've had a couple years of production and he's still kind of up and down this year, but I still think he deserves to be there. And then you get into Jordan Love is now entered in that conversation. He was QB4 in October DLF ADP. You still got Stroud and Mahomes, even though he's not producing at like what we thought that he would be or has done in the past. He's still Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, maybe Kyler Murray, but that the names start getting pretty dicey that I feel like a rookie quarterback doing what he's doing is deserving of being maybe the QB3 in Dynasty.
And I hear what you're saying, but I think we can't forget about the other big name rookie quarterback. And there's a few, but I'm talking about one specifically. The former 101 in every rookie draft, now our 102, Caleb Williams. And look, I know I'm biased. I know I am the Bears fan. I know people will will absolutely say that. But Caleb Williams, the last 4 weeks, has looked vastly improved. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has thrown, I mean, just coming off of a 4 touchdown game, has a 70% completion percentage over the last month. He's doing everything Jayden Daniels is doing. And I think, to be perfectly honest, if you want to go into like pass charts and things like that, he looks like a more complete quarterback right now. Jayden Daniels has the rushing upside. He has the big playability, which Caleb Williams has not had. And I think that's the differentiator right now. If Caleb Williams starts producing these big plays that just have not been there in Chicago, then I think you're back to a coin flip for the 101. But I think after really looking at it, I agree. I think Jayden Daniels, the top 3 quarterback, makes sense. And Caleb Williams is probably in that top 5 to 7 range with that tier of Burrow and some other guys. And again, that might be my bias showing, but are you feeling the same way?
No, I mean, yeah, definitely based on what Caleb Williams has done over the past month, he has certainly been improving every single week. I mean, even if you include week 2, if we just want to drop week 1, just kind of remove that from the equation. It was his first game. They played a really good Titans defense as well. But from week 2 up until this past week, I mean, he's on pace for 4,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, and he's also on pace for over 500 rushing yards. So that is some monumental numbers as a rookie in this Bears offense that really hasn't had Keenan Allen for a good bit of those games. And DJ Moore's just kind of been meh. Rome Odunze hasn't really done all that much. And like you said, like that is pretty comparable to what Jayden Daniels is on a fantasy standpoint, because Daniels has all the rushing. Daniels is on pace for 4,000 passing yards too, but only 17 passing touchdowns. But he's also on pace for 1,011 on the ground. So I mean, they're both equally magnificent. I think that because of Jayden Daniels' rushing ability and the explosiveness that he has in that capacity for fantasy football, I think that's what lends him to being more of a top 3 guy. And then Caleb Williams still being in that, QB 5 to 7 area, just like you said, with Stroud and Burrow and Mahomes and Jordan Love and all those guys. I think that Caleb is definitely deserving of being right in there. All right, Justin, but to move away from the quarterbacks for a second, with the 1.03, I'm moving to the wide receiver position. And just like I did at the 101, I took a different QB1 than what was consensus back in April and May. I'm taking a different wide receiver here than what was consensus back then. And I'm going with Malik Nabers, the guy who has, I think, literally seen no less than 60% of a target share that feels like an exaggeration, but also somewhat feels kind of accurate too, based on what he's been doing. I mean, he's on pace for over 200 targets this year. This guy is absolutely insane. And I'm going to give you the same question basically that I gave you with Jayden Daniels. Is Malik Nabers a top 3 dynasty wide receiver? Because I've seen him ranked that way, that he's already put himself ahead of a lot of other young stud guys who've done it year in and year out for the past few years. But based on Malik Nabers, what he's doing already at his age as a rookie, is he worth being that high of a value?
Yes, I think he's in that conversation, right? I think that tier has gotten really big. The top end tier, like Nico Collins, I think has jumped into that tier when he's fully healthy. Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. There's a lot of guys that belong in that tier. Malik Nabers has to be there. Not only is he putting up insane numbers with Daniel Jones, who we all pretty much crowned, a wide receiver killer, he's pulling in a 36% target share. And yes, like that's a bad wide receiver room, but there's a lot of really good wide receivers in bad wide receiver rooms that don't pull in that kind of target share. His ability is unparalleled right now, and the usage is elite. And whoever his future quarterback is, maybe a Shadur Sanders, or hope to God not a Carson Beck, but somebody in that 2025 class is going to have an elite wide receiver one that they're going to be able to just pepper over and over, because I think the question of does quarterback play matter with him? We have the answer, and it's no. But I do want to go back to the quarterbacks at the 104 here. So at the 104, it's going to be Drake Maye. And I still don't think we've seen enough of Drake Maye to have a really strong lean one way or the other. But I think from what we have seen him do, I mean, he's been productive for fantasy, and he's been, I think, more productive than a lot of us anticipated, given what he's working with in New England. It's a bad offensive line. Some would say one of the worst in the NFL. And the wide receiver room is abysmal. Like, their rookie wide receivers have not panned out. They've given them nothing. Jalen Polk has not been good. Javon Baker literally can't get on the field. He's playing with Pop Douglas, KJ Osborne, guys that really should not be your 1 and 2 in any scenario. And Drake Maye continues to survive out there. I think, look, the tools are there. If you want to pull up his pass chart from, the first 2 games, he looks like a well-rounded quarterback that can throw to all levels of the field, and he can play against, tough defenses and not completely fold. So, look, I like Drake Maye. The tools are there. The upside is there. It's really just a matter of, can they get him actual weapons for him to hopefully take the next step forward. But right now, as like a QB2 in Dynasty, I think you could do a lot worse. And grabbing that at the 104, given the tools, is a lot more interesting.
The upside for Drake Maye is exactly like what you said. He is producing over the past 2 weeks at a level that we did not expect him to do, coming in immediately into this offense with that offensive line, with the wide receivers. So if he's already doing it now with this situation, imagine what happens when he actually gets the weapons. That is the upside with Drake Maye. Imagine if they go out and they spend up in free agency, or they trade for somebody. They go get a T. Higgins. Maybe they trade for a Michael Pittman, or they go out and they get some other kind of wide receiver that becomes available later on in the year or next offseason because of contracts and stuff like that. Or they go out and they get a rookie in next year's class, which is very top heavy at the current moment. And they could be in line for a Luther Burden or a Tet McMillan, or, at worst, maybe they get like Emeka Egbuka or somebody like that, which is still a very high quality prospect and type of player to come in and be the alpha wide receiver 1 in this offense. That's the upside with Drake Maye. And we also can't forget that he is also still running. I mean, it's only just a 2-game sample size, but through 2 games, he's rushed 10 times for 68 yards, which is a 17-game sample or 17-game pace of 68 attempts for 476 yards. Not all that dissimilar than what Caleb Williams is also doing right now on a rushing standpoint. So the passing is there without many weapons. Imagine what he does with weapons. The rushing upside is also there. It's just Drake Maye, like you said. I mean, in terms of QB2s, when a lot of guys are either really bad or they're aging out right now that we had in the QB2 range prior to the season, Drake Maye has kind of come in and asserted himself as a guy that I think most everybody's going to want to have as their QB2
Two
with
with
long-term
long-term
QB1 upside.
QB1.
All right, Justin, moving away from quarterback again, and we're not even going to hit on wide receiver at this point. I want to talk about, I mean, he's basically a wide receiver right now. Brock Bowers at the 1.05 is doing insane things, not even just for a tight end in general, for even just a rookie tight end, but just for as a rookie wide receiver, so to speak. Brock Bowers is doing insane things. I mean, he basically already came in and was like the Dynasty tight end one almost as soon as he got drafted, but he has solidified that position for himself, and nobody's even close. I mean, the production that he's had from day one with a horrible quarterback situation has been nothing short of absolutely amazing. I think the only question is not where do you value him among tight ends, but where does he start to be valued overall among other wide receivers, among quarterbacks, among running backs. Just we've seen Kyle Pitts go to a level that was insane for a rookie tight end already after his 1,000-yard season. Brock Bowers is going to blow that season out of the water. So really the question is, how high can this man actually go?
Look, Brock Bowers, we were just talking about this before we recorded. Brock Bowers has essentially hit or turned into prime Travis Kelce as a rookie. Like, he is giving you wide receiver one numbers 7 games into his career with god awful quarterback play. Like, nobody's gonna sit there and say Alex O'Connell, Gardner Minshew are he's like they're great QBs. That's who I want throwing to my wide receiver. For Minshew, he did turn Pittman into a wide receiver one, but that's besides the point. Brock Bowers as a tight end, clearly the tight end one. 25% target share, leads tight ends in targets. I mean, 31% target rate. Like, just usage you only could dream of for a tight end. He's doing it immediately. He's a borderline first round pick in startups. In non-super flex startups, like among position players, he's probably one of the first 12 players taken, I think. I think he's entered that realm, and that's probably reactionary. I don't really care. Like, he's that good. But going back to the wide receiver position, because look, what Brock Bowers is doing is insane. But there's another wide receiver in this class that is also putting up, I mean, freakish numbers as a rookie, and it's Brian Thomas. At the 106, that's where I want to go. I want to take Brian Thomas because he has just flashed immense upside in what was supposed to be a very, very crowded wide receiver room. He's pulling in, a 21% target share right now. That's fine, right? On pace for just over 100 targets. But what he's doing with those targets, that's the story. He's on pace for 1,250 yards and 10 touchdowns. The man is a big play machine. And yes, you want more volume out of him, of course. But being able to capitalize and produce like he is, that target share is only going to continue to rise. He should be around 23, 24% by the end of his rookie year. I think the Jaguars are realizing he's better than Christian Kirk. He's more explosive and more dynamic than Evan Ingram. Brian Thomas Jr. has solidified himself as a wide receiver one. And the reason I'm taking him over somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. is Marvin Harrison Jr. is in a worse wide receiver room, is barely beating him in terms of usage, and he's not producing like Brian Thomas Jr. is. At some point, we have to look at the actual production. I think that's the reason Marvin Harrison Jr. is still on the board at 106 when he used to be the 102 in every single draft. Do you feel the same way? Is that why he's on the board here for you and Brian Thomas Jr. is ahead of him?
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, the 107 is Marvin Harrison Jr. So that is my next pick because we've gone too far for Marv to have fallen any more than the 1.07. But I think that just speaks to how good this entire class has been up to this point, with everybody producing so early on, and one of those guys especially being Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, like, it took him a couple of weeks to really kind of get into this offense. He saw 4 targets in each of week 1 and week 2, but week 3 saw 9 targets, week 4 saw 9 targets, week 5 saw 8 targets. The past 2 weeks have been the lower target numbers because Evan Ingram has returned, and people, I remember after the first London game when they played Chicago and Evan Ingram had like 10 for 100, everybody was like, oh, this is what the offense is going to look like. Sorry, Brian Thomas Jr. people. And then he just came back last week and had 5 for 90 and a touchdown. So, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr., we have to remember that he is as good as he is doing right now, he is still a rookie, and there is still even room to grow on top of what he was doing. The offense could be so much better. Trevor Lawrence could still be better. BTJ himself could still be better and haul in, drop touchdown passes like he had 2 weeks ago. I mean, there is so much upside here that I'm willing to invest into BTJ over Marvin Harrison, just because of what I've already seen, but then also the trajectory moving forward is just so immense for BTJ.
And like love fest aside, like we obviously love Brian Thomas Jr. You already, kind of buried the lead, I think, a little. Like Marvin Harrison, the 107. And look, he's pulling in a 22% target share. In a vacuum, as a rookie, that's great. The reason I think we're all a little bit disappointed is how much hype and projection we all threw on to Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think as like a fantasy community, dynasty community, whatever you want to call it, we owe a little bit of the blame because, again, just by itself, it's a good season. If any rookie wide receiver pulling in 22% of their targets, of a team's targets, I think is fantastic. That's what you want to see. But he is obviously underwhelmed relative to what we all anticipated, and that's the reason he's falling. Because look, it's a wide open wide receiver room. It's him. It's Michael Wilson, if you buy into that. It's Trey McBride, who obviously we both like a lot. But Marvin Harrison Jr. should be seeing 25 to 26% of targets. Think about what Drake London did a few years back. That's the type of usage he should be seeing, and he's not. So at some point we have to question, why is that? And we need to reassess. After 7 weeks, that is not a small sample in the span of like a season. In the grand scheme of things, it may be small, but right now, there's just guys that are doing better than he is with either similar or better usage, and we have to adjust as a dynasty community.
It is funny that Marvin Harrison Jr. is having a really bad season, but for a rookie, I mean, if you just go from week 2 on, not including the game that he left 2 weeks ago with a concussion and only played like 8 snaps, but basically weeks 2 through 5, and then week 7 this past week, he is still on pace for over 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. So, like, and I know like a lot of that is kind of hinging on that week 2 performance where he had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had those 2, the one big play touchdown and then the other touchdown in that game too. But I mean, he's still been a really good rookie wide receiver. I think that it was, like you said, it was just our expectations coming in was that he was not just any rookie wide receiver, but that was kind of part of the risk of putting, Marvin Harrison as a borderline top 5 dynasty guy already without ever seeing him play. This was the risk with taking him so high in redraft leagues as well, that, he's still a rookie. What if he just needs a little bit of time to get acclimated? And this Cardinals offense is definitely not as good as what I projected it to be, but I still think it's a better situation. I mean, Kyler Murray is 100% still better than Daniel Jones. He is better than, Gardner Minshew and O'Connell. He is better than a bunch of other. I still think he's better than Trevor Lawrence. And so Marvin Harrison Jr. I think him being at 107 is more a testament to everybody else in this class and not as much of a testament to Marv himself underproducing.
And after Marvin Harrison, I think this is where like we get the first clear cut tier break in this rookie class. Because look, Marvin Harrison Jr., like Addison just said, is still producing. The guy at 108, Odunze, still has the tools, is still an exciting player, but his production is well below that of anybody we've talked about to date. Look, this was, I think, the expectation for most people with Odunze. When you go into a room that has DJ Moore, and you go into a room that has Keenan Allen, right? You have a rookie quarterback. You have DeAndre Swift. You have Cole Kmet. It's a very, very busy offense. I think anybody that was expecting Odunze to have this massive monster breakout was misguided. It just wouldn't have made a ton of sense. But with that being said, he's still flashed. Without Keenan Allen, right? He has a 11 target, 6 reception game for 112 yards and a touchdown. You've seen the upside with Odunze. But the problem is right now, he's playing with professional, top 20 wide receivers, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. Those guys are going to earn more targets than him because they're better than Rome Odunze is at this point right now. And he's still managing to pull in just under a 17% target share, which if you've watched some of our videos in the offseason, 17% is the mark that we want to see for rookie wide receivers. I don't want to do the JSN thing with Rome Odunze, which is like, it doesn't matter at all. Because it does matter a little bit. But still, the route running looks good. The player looks good. They've just missed on a couple of throws deep that would, I think, dramatically shift the outlook on Rome Odunze's season. I'm still very high on the guy, but given how well everybody ahead of him has produced, you just can't take him any higher than he's going right here.
I am in agreement with you that, Odunze needs to be here for the long-term trajectory. I mean, nothing has really changed. It was kind of, we knew coming into this, especially after just watching what JSN did last year. And we had higher expectations, I think, for JSN going into Seattle, that he could beat out Tyler Lockett and assert himself, especially because he kind of did that at Ohio State with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. He kind of had a history of, beating out other talent that we thought was maybe better or that he's just as good as, and he can still produce. So I think with that fresh in our mind, we definitely had fairer expectations for Rome Odunze this year because of we just watched it with him playing with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, rookie quarterback as well, new offensive coordinator for the entire team, new running back and DeAndre Swift. A lot of this was unknown, so there was a lot going in for Chicago. The one question that I have for you, because I'm just looking at his stats, and I've definitely watched a good amount of Rome Odunze from what he's done for the first 6 games, but he has a 54% catch percentage, 17 receptions on 31 targets. Can you talk more into that? Like, have you noticed that has been maybe a misconnection between him and Caleb? Is that a scheme thing based on the type of routes that he's running? Because I feel like if we got a little bit more of like a few more receptions off of those 31 targets, his production would be a lot higher, and we'd have maybe more faith in him moving forward than what we already have still projecting on talent alone coming out of college.
Yeah, it's really been missed connections. Like, they just early on in the season, especially, like they were just not on the same page, missing a lot of deep shots, a lot of his route running right now because of his skill set and the wide receiver group. He's running a lot of deep routes. You're seeing that in his average depth of target. It's 13th highest among wide receivers right now. He is taking a lot of deep shots. And what I like Player Profiler is they give you what they call true catch rate. So they filter out the uncatchable targets. He has a 95% true catch rate, which means the majority of targets that are catchable, he's catching. But they just, look, the deep ball hasn't been there. We talked about it with Caleb up top. And that has been a lot of what he's seen. And just as that rounds into form, they'll get better. If that happens this year, that's a huge question mark, which is why, again, I'm not super high on him rest of season. I don't expect a massive breakout year. But long term, I think Rome Odunze has shown or flashed enough for us to still be, I think, really, really excited about him.
But speaking of players that have underperformed, and it's not really necessarily this guy's fault at the 109, he's underperformed because he hasn't actually seen the field, and that is Jonathon Brooks, who, I mean, we knew coming into the season was coming off of a torn ACL. He started the year on the PUP. It's been a couple of weeks since, he was eligible to return from the PUP, and we still haven't seen him yet. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that, but I'm still taking Jonathon Brooks here at the 109 because this is basically where I had him ranked pre-draft and post-draft as well, around this kind of 109 area. And we haven't seen him play. People have kind of maybe moved above or below him, but he's just kind of stayed just because I'm still hinging on what we've seen from him in college, and he's still a projection in the NFL because we haven't seen him play. Is there anything that you maybe have any insight on Jonathon Brooks, and anything to add on to that than other than the fact that he's just still a prospect that we saw come out of Texas?
No, I haven't been watching Panthers practice. Haven't seen him play. There's no insight. Like, he's here because, look, other guys have underperformed behind him. Where he's still a nice, interesting long-term play. I think the best version of Jonathon Brooks is probably going to be next year, 2 years removed from the ACL. That'll be exciting. I'm not putting a ton of stock in what he does this season unless it's just truly abysmal. So for now, 109 it is.
Just to put a bow on this, what Chuba Hubbard has been doing is actually giving me confidence for Jonathon Brooks, because I think Jonathon Brooks is so much better than Chuba Hubbard. And if this is what Chuba's able to do with a full workload in this Panthers offense and this Dave Canales offense that, you know, did really well with Kenneth Walker, did really well with Rashad White last year, is doing well with Chuba Hubbard. I think Jonathan Brooks is better than Chuba. So when Brooks gets the entire workload and all of this volume that Chuba's getting now, I mean, we could see a truly like top 5 fantasy season, and that would vault him into being a top 5 dynasty running back as well.
But going back to players that have actually played this season, at the 110, I'm going to take Bo Nix. And look, I don't love Bo Nix, admittedly, but I understand the positional value that a quarterback brings in Dynasty. And that's why Bo Nix is at the 110 for me. He has done enough on the ground to become an interesting fantasy asset, because that's where all of his production is really coming from right now, right? 600-yard pace on the ground, 7 touchdowns. That's what he's tracking for. Through the passing game, you're getting next to nothing. And admittedly, that's not completely Bo Nix's fault, right? He's on pace for 3,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 12 picks. But he's also throwing to Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele. And look, it's not a great group of wide receivers. Nobody's going to question that. They can't separate. They're not winning down the field. They're not winning short. They're not winning intermediate. Greg Dulcich, he just has become a healthy scratch. I mean, he's gotten fully benched. Lucas Kroll is their starting tight end now. They are not in a good spot. Bo Nix is not put in a position to succeed. This is about projection for Bo Nix. And hopefully his footwork gets cleaned up, his throwing motion and his accuracy deep get cleaned up, because he has the rushing upside and the athleticism to be interesting for fantasy. But he has to bring along the passing. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter what he does on the ground long term. So I think even at 110, he's a risky pick because he could flame out, I think, very quickly. But like I said, the rushing upside is what makes him at least semi-interesting for fantasy right now.
There's a kind of value security with these young quarterbacks, especially the first round guys, the guys that are able to come in and produce decently for fantasy football. And like you said, a lot of that is coming off of what he's been able to do on the ground and not really through the air. But this is, like another kind of Drake May New England Patriots thing. Like, what would happen if Bo Nix does get, a really good wide receiver that can come in either as another rookie or a free agent, somebody else who can, be Deontay Johnson to what we had hoped would happen with Bryce Young, which is now happening for Andy Dalton. But somebody even of that caliber of wide receiver would be a good thing for Bo Nix and maybe artificially raise his dynasty value to where you could maybe sell him for more than what you bought into him, especially at this kind of, late first round pick ish value. Like he might end up being Kenny Pickett, which is basically what he's on pace to do. Like Kenny Pickett, once he took over as a rookie, was on pace for 3,200, 10 and 8, and Bo Nix is on pace for 3,000, 12 and 12. So more or less, they're kind of the same. But Kenny Pickett, I mean, I got into arguments with people going into year 2 because I knew that Kenny Pickett wasn't good. I don't think Bo Nix is any good, but people believe. There are people out there that, can believe in some upside, and that comes with some value security from a dynasty standpoint. There is some upside. I'm not going to say that there's a high probability that he hits the upside, but there is upside here and value security, and I think that it's a fine pick here at the 110. But speaking of value security, I think with the 111, I am just going to basically pick another rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy, a guy that obviously we have not seen play yet because he got hurt in the preseason, out for the entire year. But I think that JJ McCarthy is a better quarterback than Bo Nix. Bo Nix just gets the nod because he's scoring fantasy points right now. But what we've seen from this offense, obviously, it's all still true of what we were talking about all summer long. It's Kevin O'Connell. It's Justin Jefferson. It's Jordan Addison. It's TJ Hawkinson. Maybe it's Aaron Jones next year, whoever else the running back ends up being if it's not Aaron Jones. It's a fantastic situation. It's one that's making Sam Darnold look like an MVP candidate right now. And that is why I want to buy into JJ McCarthy. I think the only question, Justin, is Sam Darnold playing so well enough that we actually don't see JJ McCarthy for maybe another year or two? I've heard the rumors that they're going to Jordan Love him. Is that going to be an issue for you?
Look, you have the luxury of bringing JJ McCarthy along slowly off of a catastrophic knee injury. Like, JJ McCarthy's not going to be ready to go in training camp next year. I will say if Darnold falters at all, which is very likely next season, right? He's been a career journeyman quarterback for a reason. It is unlikely he is just all of a sudden good now, just forever. Like, that's not the most likely scenario here. If he falters at all this season or next, the chorus of people calling for JJ McCarthy will get very loud, and it'll get loud very quickly. So that's the piece with Sam Darnold, is he is going to constantly be playing for his job next season specifically, and if that gets to him, you'll see JJ McCarthy. I don't think you're going to get a Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins, Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type situation, because I don't think Sam Darnold is as good as Aaron Rodgers, which isn't a hot take, and I don't think he's as good as Kirk Cousins is. So look, it could be risky, but I think JJ McCarthy is the starter at some point next season. All right, and to close out our first round, let's go back to a player that's played. I'm taking Ladd McConkey, and I know this was a hot button topic for us all offseason, throughout rookie season. But Ladd McConkey, I think, while his counting numbers are not exceptional by any stretch of the imagination, right? On pace for 68 receptions, 750 yards, 6 touchdowns. So I think is fine. The underlying numbers are much, much better in terms of usage. This right now is a low volume passing offense because, one, Justin Herbert has been injured, and then Roman and Harbaugh are one of the more run heavy tandems at head coach and offensive coordinator in the NFL. So this was not going to be a high volume offense because they don't have the personnel to run that kind of offense. You have Ladd McConkey and basically nobody else, maybe Josh Palmer, who's been in and out of the lineup with injuries, but otherwise it's not a good group. And that's what makes Ladd McConkey's usage at least encouraging. 25% target share, a 30% air yard share. That is what you want to see from a wide receiver in a bad room. You want them to earn that type of usage because they're not really fighting with anybody that should be taking a lot of targets away from them. If this offense ever flipped the script and decided to become pass heavy, Ladd McConkey becomes a potential wide receiver too if that volume sticks. That's what's interesting here. Long term, as this offense grows and evolves, he may step into a much larger role, but you can't really put him much higher because we're projecting situation changes. And we just need to go off of the talent and what we're currently looking at right now. So that's why Ladd is stuck here at 112 rather than, ahead of JJ McCarthy or like Bo Nix at 110.
And I know that there's going to be certain people that are already going to start to smile when I say this, but I am slowly beginning to take the L on Ladd McConkey. I say slowly because, like you said, like the counting stats haven't necessarily been fantastic because it's a low volume offense, and I like everybody kind of knew it. That was the danger of the Harbaugh Roman thing coming in. The Justin Herbert wasn't going to throw, and that was just going to funnel down to everybody else and all the other receivers in the offense. And that is happening with Ladd McConkey. If you are starting Ladd McConkey on a weekly basis, you have not been really all that happy with his sub 10 PPR point production unless he's scoring a touchdown, which he's only scored in 2 out of 7 games or 6 games. But what I am starting to take the L on is that he has seen 7+ targets in 4 of his 6 games. He has basically by far been the wide receiver 1 for the team, ahead of Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer. And the second leading receiver for them in terms of yards is Will Disley right now, I think primarily because of what happened a couple nights ago, but that's where we're at with the state of the LA Chargers receiving room. And that really doesn't mean that Ladd McConkey needed to necessarily do much to be the wide receiver 1. So I'm still holding on to the fact that I think that he is a low upside guy, that if they actually get another alpha wide receiver in here, that McConkey will fall back down in the totem pole to not being the wide receiver 1. I basically view him as, like Zay Flowers light, where I think that he could be a really heavy target earner, but maybe he's held back by the offense. Maybe he's held back by another piece that's going to come into this offense later on down the road, even if their pass volume increases. So I'm beginning to take an L on McConkey from a talent and semi-fantasy football perspective, but I still think that there are issues here that he doesn't necessarily scream elite breakout wide receiver at any point in his career.
the usage is encouraging. That's what I come back to here because we see a lot of guys step into bad wide receiver rooms and they don't do a damn thing. Jalen Polk. Um, that's an issue. He's clearing the first hurdle, which is can you be the best wide receiver in a bad room? That's all. That's all that's being asked of him right now, and he's doing that. So that's a feather in his cap right now. Long term, that's a question we don't have the answer to right now. But he looks like a professional wide receiver that isn't just a bust, which is a huge win. Given some of the huge questions that we had on him on his profile coming out of college and into the NFL, I think he's passed and kind of put that behind him. He can be an NFL wide receiver. What level he gets to, I think, is still very much up in the air.
All right, now we did continue drafting through the rest of the second round to give you guys a complete top 24 for the rookie redraft right now. So this second round that's up on the screen right now, this is where you're going to find your Michael Penixes, your Trey Bensons, your Keon Coleman's, some of the other kind of more handcuffy running backs like Ray Davis and Braylon Allen and Blake Corum. The one name on this second round list, though, that was not mentioned in the first round, I think it's a glaring omission from the first round when we were drafting back in April and May to where we are right now, is Xavier Worthy. We did take him at the 2.03. That's where he ended up falling in this top 24. But this is a guy that was being drafted 108, 109, maybe even top 5 or 6 to somebody who was really in on the Kansas City Chiefs landing spot. But we have him here at the 2.03, Justin. So I think that he's the one guy that merits a little bit of a conversation for why it feels like we're a little bit lower on him. Do you want to jump in and get going?
Look, this is not a good wide receiver room without Rashee Rice. I think everybody acknowledges that, accepts that. Like Xavier Worthy came in, and I think everybody widely considered him the second best wide receiver behind Rashee Rice. Obviously, yes, Travis Kelce is there and is a large looming presence. But once Rashee Rice went out, you didn't see a huge uptick, if any, really, for Xavier Worthy. They've kind of kept him as a part-time player, playing roughly 60% of the snaps. That is a bit concerning for a first-round wide receiver that the team invested heavily in. And yes, the Chiefs tend to bring guys, rookie wide receivers especially, along slowly. And he saw 8 targets after the bye week. That's great. But pre-bye week, Xavier Worthy did not rise to the occasion. He's been a gadgety type player. They've had to scheme up touches or really throw the ball deep. And it's been a bit of a one-trick pony for me. I just would have expected or hoped to have seen more from him, given he's fighting for targets for most of the season with Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, and you just haven't seen him really break onto the scene. And that game might be coming. But right now, it looks very limited early on for Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, he was a player that I personally was lower on pre-draft than what seemed like a lot of other people. And my biggest fear was that he would come into the NFL and be a one-trick pony. Maybe not like a complete gadgety kind of guy, but just a guy that people, they really latched on to that 4.2 speed and said he's just going to, crush defenses with 4.2 speed, and he's going to open up things over the short to intermediate areas for some other guys. And he is not going to be a guy that has a complete route tree that is able to sustain, top 20, top 15, even wide receiver 1, top 12 fantasy production. And the one offense that I thought maybe he could have broken away from that was the Kansas City Chiefs. I had hope. But like you said, we have seen now through 6 games, he has not had a single game over 3 receptions. That's despite seeing 6 targets the first week without Rashee Rice and 8 targets this past week after the bye without Rashee Rice and without Juju Smith-Schuster. He only has 1 game over 50 receiving yards, and that was primarily because, he caught a long touchdown. So that's been the name of the game for Xavier Worthy. And I think the even scarier part is that through 6 games, he is on pace for 561 receiving yards, which if anybody has been following us and watches us, especially Justin's videos in the offseason, knows 500 is a very key number for rookie wide receivers. I think it's like basically 90 or 95% of them that do not hit 500 as a rookie, for whatever reason, do not eclipse 750 as a sophomore. And then that basically means that your career is not, maybe not even completely in shambles, but you are severely behind the eight ball, especially for Dynasty. And I mean, Xavier Worthy's on pace to beat it, but he is really, really close. That if he just puts together a couple more sub 30, sub 20 games, like he has 3 of them right now, especially in the situation that he's in right now. No Rashee Rice, no Hollywood Brown. I think we've forgotten that Hollywood was even a thing. Um, and Travis Kelce's getting old, not as integrated in the offense as he once was. This is a prime opportunity for Xavier Worthy to showcase that he could be more than just a deep threat. And at this moment, he is not doing that.